In this video, we're going to talk about pest control theory. Let's go ahead and dive in. First off, what's a pest? A pest is any organism that is living, growing, or existing in a place where humans do not want it. I'm going to say that one more time because we are, after all, a pest control company, and so every single member of this company needs to understand what a pest is. A pest is any organism that is living, growing, or existing in an area where humans do not want it. So is a weed a pest? Absolutely. It's an organism that's growing in a place where we don't want it. So in your backyard, if you have turf, and in that turf you have Kentucky blue and fine fescue grass, anything other than fine fescue and Kentucky bluegrass is a weed and therefore a pest. What about a spider? Is a spider a pest? Well, it depends where it is. A spider is not a pest generally speaking, but if it's in your house and you don't want it in your house, then it's a pest. What about bees? Honeybees. Are they a pest? Well, just like spiders or anything else, they're not a pest if they're where they're supposed to be. But if a bee is in your house flying around, it's a pest. Now, when we say any organism that is growing, living, or existing in an area where humans don't want it, that's a pest. There are certain species or certain organisms that are classified as pests in the broad sense of the word. For example, the European starling is not native to the North American continent. And so everybody in North America has essentially come together, or enough people in North America have come together, and we've said this is not native. We don't want this organism in North America at all. And so European starling is classified as an invasive species. Therefore, anywhere that the European starling exists in North America is therefore a pest. Now that's the European starling has been labeled a pest generally in all of North America. A honeybee, on the other hand, has not. We want honeybees in North America. We like honeybees. They're extremely important to the environment because they pollinate flowers. They are super important to Plantilia, the entire kingdom of Plantilia. But on a micro level, in a house, if that bee comes in your house, it's a pest if you don't want it there. And so even honeybees, if you've got this hive of bees and they're nesting and they've got this huge hive behind the siding in your wall, then they can be classified as a pest and we can remove them. Now, there are certain pests that we can take care of and there are certain pests that we can't. So a deer that is coming into your yard and eating flowers, is that a pest? And the answer is absolutely yes. However, Penguin Pest Control can't go out and shoot a deer because it's federally protected. The same thing with wolves and owls and things like that. There are certain pests that we as Penguin Pest Control are legally allowed to get rid of, and there's certain pests like elk that come into a farmer's field and eat their corn or their grain. Those elk are pests, but there's nothing the farmer can do about it. So anyways, that's a pest. Any organism that is living, existing, or growing in an area where humans don't want it. Let's talk about a pesticide. A pesticide is any chemical that's used to get rid of any pest. And so insecticides, fungicides, larvicides, herbicides, rodenticides, termiticides, all of those are subsets of a pesticide. An insecticide is a product it's a pesticide that's specifically designed to get rid of insects. A fungicide is a pesticide that's specifically designed to get rid of fungus. Herbicide is a pesticide that's specifically designed to kill some sort of plant. And so there are herbicides that could be selective herbicides, and they only kill a specific kind of plant. We use those a lot when we did lawn care. We would put a selective herbicide on the lawn and it would kill broadleaf plants, but it wouldn't kill the grass, assuming of course that you mixed it at the right rates. A rodenticide is a pesticide that's designed to get rid of rodents, and a termiticide is a pesticide that's designed to get rid of termites, and most of those work really well on ants also. So that's what a pesticide is. I just want to emphasize that a pesticide is a broad term for any chemical that's designed to get rid of a pest. And these other subsets, insecticides, herbicides, etc., are specific pesticides to get rid of a specific kind of pest. Let's go ahead and carry on. When can pest control be done? In order to answer this question, you have to understand two terms. The first is tolerance, and the other is called economic loss. And we use these terms to determine what kind of pest control or when we can do pest control with either a homeowner, in the case of tolerance, or economic loss in the case of a business. So what are these? Let's start with tolerance. If you're dealing with a homeowner, they will have a certain amount of tolerance for whatever kind of bug or pest is in or around their house. So again, let's go back to the spiders. Are spiders pests? Well, generally speaking, no. I mean, if they're out in an area where they're supposed to be, that's fine. But when the spiders start coming into people's houses, assuming that those people don't want them there, then it's a pest and we can do pest control. Now the question is, the individual that lives there, what is their tolerance for bugs? If they have a very low tolerance, then we need to do more pest control for them. And maybe I've ran into some customers that have just an extremely low tolerance. They have major arachnophobia. And in fact, when I first started Penguin Pest Control, I talked to this one lady, and she was having pest control done once every week. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. And she's like, I can't stand spiders. And I told her, I said, well, you probably get the same results with, or close to the same results with just a monthly treatment. And she's like, nope, I want it every single week. So again, her tolerance was really, really low. Just did not want any bugs ever in her house. Essentially wanted 100% control. And so in that case, obviously pest control needed to be done for her, and her tolerance was really low. Now there's other people who maybe they don't like spiders in their house, but they have a greater tolerance, meaning that while they don't want bugs in their house, they're okay if they see an occasional bug here and there, but they don't want their house to be full of bugs. And so in that case, we're going to set a treatment plan that matches their tolerance. Now let's talk about a business. When dealing with a business, we look at a term called economic loss. So if you have this restaurant and there's flies buzzing all around, it will cause some customers to not want to eat there because the flies annoy them. And essentially what those customers will do is they'll just decide to go somewhere else, and that represents economic loss for that business. Another example of economic loss could be if a company or a restaurant has a bunch of cockroaches or mice and the health department comes down and shuts them down. If that happens, then obviously that represents a huge level of economic loss for the company. Now, the economic threshold is when you look at the economic loss and say it's $1,000, therefore the economic threshold is $1,000 or maybe $900, meaning that if we put together a treatment plan for $900 and the company is losing $1,000, then in theory the company should use our treatment plan because it would save them $100 per month. Now, the economic threshold is not quite exactly at the economic loss, meaning that if the company is losing $1,000 and we put together a $1,000 package, then it's probably not worth their time to fix it because the cost of the treatment is equal to the cost of the problem. And most people would say, you know what, I'll just deal with the problem, it's not worth it. So if there's a $1,000 loss, then the proprietor of that business may be okay with an economic threshold of maybe $800 or $700. So if we came in with a treatment plan for $250 a month, then they should jump on that deal because that would save them $750 per month. It's way below their economic threshold, their economic loss. So these are the two things we look at when we're dealing with a customer, whether it's a business or a company, whether it's a business or a residence. Tolerance and economic loss. Let's go ahead and move on, and now we're going to look at how much pest control should be done. Well, this pertains, again, back to the same concepts of tolerance and economic threshold, meaning that the lower the tolerance, the more pest control that they need to do. In the instance of the example I just gave you with the lady that had this huge fear of spiders, she wanted a lot of pest control done. And if the economic loss is huge, then we could do a lot of pest control and we could charge the customer a lot of money if we had to, and they would be happy to pay it as long as it's below their economic threshold. On this slide, I want to talk about one concept, and it's the 100% concept. So typically in pest control, we never achieve 100% control of any pest. There's a few exceptions to that. With termites, we achieve 100% control, and with bed bugs, we also achieve 100% control. Anything less than 100% control with either one of those pests, and I might say especially with bed bugs, is unacceptable. And likewise, with those two kinds of pests, the cost is more. And that's true to the form of this principle that I'm about to teach. The closer that you get to 100%, the more the price will increase exponentially. So if somebody wants 70% control of their spiders, the price will be X. If they want to go from 70% to 80%, the price might increase by 10%. So we increased 10% control, and the price increased 10%. But then once you get to 99%, in order to go to 99, from 99 to 99.5%, the price might increase 10 times. And so we only increased 0.5%, but the price increased 5 times, 500%. And that's just a true principle. The nearer and nearer you get to 100% control, the more the price will increase exponentially. And so with pest control, when you're setting up a treatment plan, you want to manage these two concepts, the tolerance that the customer has and how much they want to pay. And these terms are inversely related to each other. It's called an inverse relationship, meaning that the more their tolerance goes down, the more the price will go up. The more tolerance that they have, the more we can bring our price down. The same thing with economic loss, their economic threshold. The more control that they want, the more it's going to cost. The less control they want, the less the less control, the less it will cost. So essentially, when you're talking with a customer, you want to, if it's a residence, a homeowner, you want to ask them about their tolerance, find out what their goals are, how much control they want, and kind of get a feeling for what their ideas are. And if you're talking to that, an older gentleman, and he's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. I've lived with spiders all my life, or I've lived with ants all my life, but the wife she doesn't really like them. With that person, I'd probably recommend a quarterly treatment plan. But with some other person, if they're like, I can't stand these things, they're just driving me crazy, these ants are in my kitchen and I just want them gone, well, then you're probably going to be looking at a monthly or maybe even every other week treatment, because clearly that individual has a much lower tolerance. Same thing with a business. You want to talk to them about their economic loss. Now, I will say one thing with the economic loss factor, which is this. It's really difficult to ascertain the exact amount of economic loss in most situations. Let's go back to the example with the flies in a restaurant. So the flies are buzzing around. A customer comes in and this fly annoys them and they don't come back, but a lot of times it's subconscious. And so the customer will come, they're a little put out by these flies. They don't really know why. It's subconsciously in their mind. They're just kind of turned off. And the next time they go out to dinner or to lunch, they decide to go to another restaurant. Why did they make that decision? If you were to ask them, they might not even know, because the decision was made in their subconscious mind. They avoided the restaurant with the flies because the last time they went, it was kind of icky and gross. We have a video that talks about the subconscious minds of people, and it's a really great video. We use it to educate business owners to help them understand that a lot of times they're losing business and they don't even know why. So again, it's kind of difficult to decide and to set exactly what the economic loss is. If you're shut down, like the health department comes in and shuts you down, that is easier to determine, okay, this is what I was making before, I'm shut down for 2 weeks, and so this is what I lost. In the case where you can't determine exactly what the loss is, then you may have to just help the customer, educate them to figure out, well, what could it potentially be? And then just make sure that you create a treatment plan that is well below that hypothetical economic loss threshold, and in most cases you'll be able to win the customer. Let's go ahead and move on. What kind of pest control should be done? We look at what's called IPM, which is called integrated pest management. The three main controls that we use are what's called mechanical, chemical, and cultural control. Mechanical control is when we use some form of mechanism or a physical device to prevent the pest from coming in. Now, earlier in this video, I mentioned elk. Elk are coming into a farmer's field and they're eating his grain or his hay or whatever. They're federally protected. There's nothing he can do about those elk. That's true in the sense that he can't kill them. But he could implement mechanical controls, which would be a fence. Maybe he could put a fence around his field, and that's perfectly fine. That's a mechanical control. Again, you're going to look at the economic loss threshold versus the cost of the treatment. So if the elk are eating $1,000 worth of hay every day, and the fence would cost $30,000 to put up, would it be worth it? Absolutely. Because if you look at the cost over time, he's losing far more than the cost of the fence. That's a mechanical control. Mechanical controls are great in a lot of circumstances when maybe chemical control isn't a good option, or if the customer has an adverse feeling towards chemical controls. Let's talk about chemical controls. Pesticides. So any sort of chemical product, a pesticide that we use to kill or repel pests, that's called a chemical control. So the foundation treatment that we do with, say, transport or bifenthrin, that's a chemical control. What's a cultural control? A cultural control is when we change the environment so the pest doesn't want to be there anymore. So a good example of this is just cleaning up somebody's yard. You know, somebody's a hoarder and they've just got all this stuff and it's just creating all kinds of harborage for pests. Cleaning that up is a cultural control because now that harborage is gone. And with IPM, you want to look at it and say, okay, how can we combine mechanical, chemical, and cultural controls all together to achieve the maximum results for the least amount of money? And with Penguin Pest Control, that's what our goal is. Now, sometimes you'll have a little bit of crossover. For example, if you have pigeons that are roosting on a house or on siding and they're making a big mess, they're leaving feces and feathers all over the place. If you were to take spikes and put them up, that is both a mechanical and a cultural control. It's a mechanical control because it's an actual physical device. It's a cultural control because it's changing the environment so the pigeons don't want to roost there anymore. It's made it so it's no longer a nice roost for them. I'll say one more thing about chemical controls. You don't want to use the same product over and over and over again. That will build up what we call resistance. So it's basically the concept of if we're using a product and it kills 99.99% of all a specific kind of pest, it gets really good at control. I mean, 99.99, that's pretty high. The problem is that in large populations, that will kill 9,999 of all 1,000 bugs or pests. The problem is the bugs that survive are the bugs that have the genetic natural resistance against that kind of pesticide, and those are the ones that breed and reproduce, and then their offspring is more likely to have that same genetic resistance. And so that pesticide used a lot over time, and when I say over time, I mean like over decades, these pests can build up resistance to that specific kind of pesticide. So what we want to do to counter that is we switch our products. We'll use transport, we'll use bifenthrin by itself, we'll use permethrin, etc., and the insects, the individuals in any group of pests that have a resistance for bifenthrin are not likely to also have a resistance against permethrin, for example, which means that if you use both of them together, instead of 99.99% control, you'll have 99.9999999% control, in which case it will take a heck of a lot longer for the pest to develop a resistance against that. It's not against just that one pesticide, but against multiple pesticides that are being used in tandem. Plus, when you use mechanical controls in combination with cultural and chemical controls, then your control just goes through the roof. It works a lot better. Another example of a mechanical control would be if you have a hole in the wall and mice are coming in. Well, you could put down mice bait and you could get rid of them with that chemical control, or you could just simply put a screen at that hole and make it so the mice can't come in, and then it's a lot less expensive. And maybe you could do a screen and then also still use a little bit of bait outside, and then you could mix that with a little cultural control. You could talk to the customer and educate them in cleaning up and keeping, maybe putting the dog food away so the mice don't have an environment that is conducive to them. And then bam, you'll get really high levels of control. When you're dealing with pests that are very difficult to eradicate and to control, such as cockroaches, especially German roaches, and elm seed bugs, it's extremely important to combine all of the tools that we have, mechanical, chemical, cultural. Use all of them together and you'll get the best results. Now let's go ahead and move on. I want to talk about cuss words. I have another video where we say that for the sake of penguin pest control, we have certain cuss words, things such as poison, pesticide, insecticide, rodenticide, anything aside. And that is true. In this video, I've talked a lot about the in-depth theory of pest control, how it works, and certainly internally speaking, we use this correct name for the products that we're using. Again, that's internally. Externally, we shy away from using things such as, words such as pesticide, and the reason is because we can simply say product. There's two really good reasons for this. The first reason is that we don't want to teach customers how to do pest control. We want to give them ideas on what we're doing and help them work together with us, but we don't want to give away the trade secrets of our company. That's one reason. It's the minor reason. The much bigger and the more important reason is just simply because we don't know what kind of adverse feelings people are going to have concerning any specific term. Now, this is always true in the situations when we're dealing with new customers. So in any sort of a sales situation, pesticide, rodenticide, anything aside, we just avoid. Just call them products. I will say that there may be some exceptions to the rules, and as a technician, you need to know your customer. And if you get to know your customer and you realize that they're perfectly fine with certain terminology, then you could potentially use terms such as insecticide or pesticide. This is even more so when you're dealing with highly educated people. So doctors, a lot of times somebody that works in like a chemical engineering situation, a lot of scientists, scientists, generally speaking, regardless of what specific discipline of science they are in, they're probably going to be okay with it. A lot of times farmers will be fine with it also. But you need to know your customer, and if you ever use any of these specific correct terms, you need to make sure that your customer is going to be okay with it. Now, if you're not sure, just err on the side of using the word product. I will say one thing really quick. Poison is just always a no-no. Always. Like rat poison, you never want to say that with a customer. No matter what. Even if they use it, it's still not a good idea for you to use it. Now, in this video, I've talked about theory and ideas and what we're trying to do, generally speaking, with the concept of pest control. In certain situations, especially if we have a customer and they have a big problem and we need their help in IPM, we need to employ them to implement certain cultural controls like clean up their backyard. In those cases, we might have to educate the customer a little bit, in which case you need to watch this video several times so that you can speak like I am speaking, so that you can sound like a professional. And in those cases, you may need to help the customer understand what you're trying to do. And you could even, in certain situations, again, it's rare, but it does happen, you may want to explain things such as, the IPM goal of what you're trying to do. And you could explain that, there's 3 different kinds of controls that we're trying to employ: mechanical, chemical, and cultural control. You could explain what those are, and then you could help the customer understand that their part in containing this problem is to do the cultural control, which is cleaning stuff up. If you do it correctly and you use the correct terms like I have done in this video, when you talk with the customer, you will come off as a professional, and they will trust you and they will appreciate that. Now, again, these are kind of abnormal situations where it's a need-to-know basis. And again, on your part, you need to know your customers. And you don't want to go into in-depth details about this kind of theory with customers unless you need to. But if you do, again, watch this video. And again, remember, never say the word poison. Be careful with the words that you use. Err on the side of just saying product. But internally speaking, we need to know how this works so that we can do a better job. Watch this video several times. This theory, pest control theory, is extremely important, not only internally, but if you want to pass your test, you have to understand it. That's all I've got. I'll catch you on the next video.